lessons to kids. Hi, Mina. How are you? Very good. Very good. Enjoying the setup. Got color cards here, hands here. So I think we're just waiting for the rest of the pieces to show.
So where are we sitting?
Here, I'm the help, so I didn't even plan on sitting.
Oh, okay.
But that's a good question from an ERG perspective, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Because
that's a good question.
she wanted to, and when we were, when Riz and I met, I thought John, he said
That's
that
a
John was
very
going to
good question.
introduce us so people would know who.
Well, Josh is outside.
How was your Veterans Day? It's fantastic. Always a pleasure seeing you. Like Sugarloaf Mountain was nice, easy. On Sunday was nice. Yeah, yeah, that's when I went actually on Sunday. So that was kind of nice, nice view. So yeah, just kind of. How about yourself? What you doing today? I know exactly. I was like, oh, good. I got a day off. I can do.
Now, the band is supposed to be here. But they want to do the camera thing.
Oh, that's like a baby.
But if you want to sit in the back, be honest, sit in the front. You got a nice seat.
Sure do. Yeah.
Yeah, at least second row.
Yeah, yeah. So, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. So, kids helping out with the care, of course. When it was a novelty. I know that's what my daughter's like, Mom, what's the care? I've heard that before. In fact, I said that to my mom. Exactly. Yeah, so. Are you on the panel? No. Actually, I'm going to work meeting, and I drive 4 today, so I'm she ended up being in the second row, so it's not, yeah. And actually, because I'm gonna sneak out, I'm gonna go on this side.
Well, and it was never like just battle. It was all singing.
That's what Bud used to say.
And usually there's always a trumpet in every trash can.
Are we ready to start?
The Veterans Day is think of how you
On Sunday, Christian suggested we start with that. Yeah.
No.
We're not much.
That's awesome. He got told no. So,
You can't reach them.
those sound loud. But coming loud out of that. Like you're doing it.
Don't let me get my breakfast.
Okay. Because we're leaving right here. They mark out.
Okay.
Did you want Greg to just follow them around? Because they're going to be there.
You want to go feel that?
So Greg, they're going that way. We'll go this way.
What way?
Somewhere in that
We were
direction.
supposed to be able to do it anyway. We were supposed to.
Somewhere in the middle. Don't you guys through the middle of one of those type of roads? The people like
It must have been Steve's shirt.
the whole way shut these stupid real. That's why we
What, good?
Oh, right. So you had a mission. Don't worry about inventory.
You got your son.
He did. He did. He did. Ceremonial. He squared away, man. His Raider make sure he's good.
Oh,
That's good. Maybe look good. Ben, so Raider make sure. Got a crowd. Go. Ready, man?
It's up there.
no one can see my face.
Great job. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rizwan Shah. I'm the Activities Chair for the Energy Vets Group. I thank you for your participation and your attendance in today's event. I have to start with a minor correction on the DOV video. It has me in the Air Force. I am U.S. Army retired. I want to get that out up front because this is live streaming for everyone out there. Go Army, not Air Force. So we're here to celebrate the Veterans Commemorative event. We obviously couldn't do it on Veterans Day, but it's really important for the Secretary of Energy and their staff and all of us at DOE to recognize the service for the veterans that they did while in the military and the service they continue to provide while in the Department of Energy. So I'm going to take a moment now and go ahead and introduce Josh Mengers. He's the Chair of Energy Vets. and he's going to be taking us through today's ceremonies and our events. Thank you very much, Josh.
Good morning to all the Energy Vets members, to all of our guests, and all of the DOE employees, and everyone out there in cyberspace watching on energy.gov live. So I'd like everyone to please rise, and we're going to post the colors. Thank you. Please be seated. I'd now like to introduce the Secretary of Energy was not able to be here, so in his stead he has a video that we will show, and cue the video.
Since the earliest days of military history, uniforms have distinguished organized forces from civilians and their adversaries on the battlefield. But they take on additional symbolic meaning as well. The men and women who wear the uniform of the United States military show the world that as Americans, what we stand for. That uniform represents freedom, justice, opportunity, and peace. But for those who wear them, those uniforms mean so much more. Service and sacrifice, duty and honor, brotherhood and valor. Many of the veterans who continue to serve their nation through their work at the Department of Energy now wear a new uniform, one that reflects our common creed to hard work, to perseverance, and to discovery and innovation. Their uniforms may have changed, but their commitment has never wavered. Our veterans remain committed to our country and our cause, and are relentless in their pursuit of excellence. I'm proud to have served and proud to continue to serve with veterans at DOE and across this country. And so today, when you thank a veteran, ask them about the uniform they wore and what it meant to them. And if they still wear one, ask them what it still means to wear it today.
And today, to give our keynote remark, we have Ms. Lisa Gordon Haggerty, the Undersecretary for Nuclear Security and NNSA Administrator. Ms. Gordon Haggerty.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Color Guard and the wonderful music that we were all so fortunate to hear this morning, so thank you very much. I would also like to thank you very much for joining us here today to commemorate this Veterans Day. I would like to also thank the Energy Vets Employee Resource Group and the Office of Environment, Health, Safety, and Security for organizing this important event. It is such an honor for me to be here and to be offered this opportunity to reaffirm the value and contributions that each veteran brings to both the Department of Energy and the NNSA. With so many veterans among our ranks, I am not at all surprised by today's turnout, both here in person and also webcasting and live streaming. November 11th carries a deep and abiding significance in my own family. My father served in World War II, Army Air Corps. My wonderful husband is retired Navy, and his stepfather served in World War II in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, noted for their being the most decorated unit in U.S. military history. Their faithful, devoted service to our nation forms a common bond that is woven into the very fabric of my family and inspires me every day in service to our great nation. While not yet a veteran, I would also like to mention my nephew, Sebastian Dubon, who is a cadet in the ROTC at the University of Dayton, and of whom I am incredibly proud of his planned path forward to eventually become an officer in the United States Army, his lifelong dream. Veterans Day is also incredibly significant for my other family, you, the Department of Energy and NNSA. Quite frankly, it's difficult for me to imagine that what this agency might look like without the contributions of its veterans, especially given the roots of NNSA that trace back to World War II and the Manhattan Project, led by such extraordinary leaders as Brigadier General Leslie Groves. Our very foundation grows from the Atomic Energy Commission forward. With roots such as these, veterans have always played an important role in our story. Consider this fact. Throughout DOE, 23% of our employees have worn a military uniform, and at NNSA, the number of our teammates exceeds 40%. Those are astounding figures to me. With that kind of experience, I'm pretty sure we could mobilize and deploy in a matter of a few weeks in case the nation called upon us in a crisis. This impressive representation of veterans across the department reflects the importance placed on our vital missions, from driving energy innovation in the energy sector to protecting the grid or maintaining our nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. Veterans like you know an important mission when you see one, and you came here to continue to serve our nation. So my message today is simply this: thank you. Thank you for your devotion to duty. Thank you for your grace under pressure. Thank you for your integrity in the face of ethical dilemmas. And thank you for your commitment to excellence you bring every single day to our missions. These values make you an indispensable member of our team and a pillar of American society. America is indebted to you for your service in uniform and to the service you are continuing to provide our Department of Energy. Just as we recognize our veterans, however, we should think about the sacrifices made by our family members. Often separated by their loved ones for long periods of time during training exercises or overseas deployments, these family members carry on and keep the home fires burning. They get kids off to school on time. They coach Little League. They send care packages. They organize homecoming ceremonies, usually while carrying on with careers of their own. Their selfless devotion is on par with their service member. You often hear military families serve too, and for good reason. It's the truth. So let's make sure that our family members feel appreciated for their own service and sacrifices as we observe Veterans Day. In fact, I am sure there are some in the audience like me who have loved ones who have served or who are serving today. My personal thanks to you for what you've done to support your soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, or Coast Guardsman. As we pay tribute to the veterans among us and all of the brave men and women who have defended our freedom as members of the military, I would also, again, like to salute the DOE Vet Success Program and its organizers. It's a program developed for veterans by veterans. In addition to our vital missions, I think this program is a key reason that DOE is able to retain so many highly qualified veterans in our team. Leaving military service is a huge transition, but our Vet Success workshops ensure veterans have all of the tools you need to succeed as our veterans transition to a civilian career. So if you're a veteran or you're new to the department, I hope you're participating in tomorrow's workshop or will sign up for future events. Please take advantage of this wonderful resource. So to wrap up, let me reiterate this point. I can't imagine the Department of Energy without the contributions of our veterans. What you bring to DOE and how you inspire our colleagues is successful to our success. And I know this sentiment is shared by both Secretary Perry and Deputy Secretary Brouillette. We are all taking cues from the examples you set. At this time, if you'd permit me, I'd like to end this conversation with a note about a military officer to whom I owe my entry into the defense programs and military application. Rear Admiral retired Jerry Ellis, former sub-pack commander, and the person who, along with Dr. Bill Bibb, convinced me not to return to Livermore, but to remain in Washington, D.C. some 27 years ago this month. Thank you. Thank you, Admiral Ellis, for your service, for your counsel, and your inspiration for me to take this giant leap, one that took me to so many great places for which I am greatly blessed and brought me home again. So on behalf of the entire DOE team, thank you, all of you veterans and all of you currently serving in uniform, and for your continued service at the department and to our incredibly blessed nation. We can't accomplish our missions without you. So thank you again. And now it's my honor to welcome Mr. Eli Ross, Director of the D.C. Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs, to say a few words. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Administrator Gordon Haggerty, thank you very much for hosting us this morning. Justin Brown, it's a pleasure to join the stage with you. I'm a very big fan of your work. Rizwan Shah, thank you for organizing this event. It's always a great opportunity to connect the DC government with veterans that are working for our federal government. And I would be remiss if I didn't say hello to Joel Spangenberg, who is a DOE employee and also vice chairman of the Mayor's Advisory Board for Veterans Affairs. And I also have one other hello to say. My sister-in-law, Sydney Bopp, is in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, so hello wherever she is today. It's truly an honor and a privilege to join you for the Department of Energy's Veterans Day program. As we indicated, my name is Eli Ross, and I am the director of Mayor Bowser's Office of Veterans Affairs. And on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser, the residents of Washington, D.C., the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs, I would like to take this moment to recognize and thank our veterans who are in attendance today. If you would just stand up, please. Thank you very much for your service. And for those of us who have worn a uniform, as the administrator indicated, it's not just us who serve, it's also our family members. So if you are a family member, a survivor, or a military or veteran caregiver, would you please stand up and be recognized? Thank you. Okay, now because this is a room full of federal government employees, I am assuming that at least one person in here is asking, what does the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs actually do? Doesn't the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs take care of veterans? And to that one person, that is an excellent question. The Office of Veterans Affairs is the state-level office for veterans who reside in the District of Columbia. And it might surprise you, but every state and territory has a state Office of Veterans Affairs. And together, we are the second largest provider of services and benefits to veterans in the United States of America. The first, obviously, being our counterparts at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And they will be the first ones to tell you that they simply can't do it alone, and that state offices of Veterans Affairs are often there to fill the service gaps that they don't have the resources for or are unable to identify. And together, we form a very cohesive partnership that allows us to better take care of our veterans and their family members. Now, Washington, D.C. is unique. Depending on your vantage point, we're a state, we're a country, and a city. Though we will be the 51st state in time, and I will save you from that stump speech this morning. In a lot of ways, we are building a model for how state and local governments can care for their veteran population. The Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs is dedicated to serving the district's veterans, their community, the families, survivors, and veteran caregivers. We address the broad range of social, economic, and healthcare needs of the district's veteran community by building strategic partnerships with public and private organizations, creating veteran-centered policy initiatives, and developing strong relationships with the veteran community. Building on these relationships, my office acts as a liaison between the district's veteran community and the mayor, our district agencies, nonprofit organizations, in order to ensure that district veterans have access to the full range of resources and benefits that are available to them. And my underlying goal is to make Washington, D.C. the most veteran-friendly city in the nation. And we have a proud military tradition in the District of Columbia. We're home to approximately 30,000 veterans. An additional 14,000 active duty, reserve, and guard members either live or work in the district. The district is home to the second highest concentration per capita of women veterans in the country. And our women veterans out-earn their male veterans in 6 out of our 8 wards, which is a fact that I always like to highlight. Over 26% of our veterans have served after 9/11, also one of the highest concentrations in America. A further 62% of our veterans are retirement eligible. These numbers do not include our family members, survivors, or military caregivers. In order to accomplish our goal of serving veterans and making Washington, D.C. the most veteran-friendly city in the nation, we have to do an absolute little bit of everything. We subscribe to the Housing First model to assist veterans most in need of services. The Bowser administration has sparked the creation or preservation of more than 10,800 affordable units and another 5,200 in pre-construction. In addition to making unprecedented investments in affordable housing since taking office, the administration has increased investments in permanent housing programs by nearly 62% and connected more than 3,300 single adults to permanent housing, including more than 1,900 veterans. Mayor Bowser has committed $100 million annually to the Housing Production Trust Fund, and that is the highest in America per capita for any city. And for those of you who are involved in veteran housing, you know that the fundamental need is permanent, affordable, supportive housing, and so our investments in this are unprecedented. We are committed to making homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring across all segments of our population. Since 2014, we have seen a 25% decrease in homelessness amongst our veteran population. This success is directly attributable to the fact that ending homelessness for veterans and all residents is a priority at the absolute highest levels of our government. Last year, we gathered to celebrate the opening of the John and Jill Kerr Conway Residences, which is a 124-unit complex that includes 60 permanent supportive housing apartments for formerly homeless veterans. And this summer, we broke ground on an additional 77 units of permanent supportive housing on the old Walter Reed campus. And for those of you who are familiar, that is the military's first Army Medical Center. And so I'm very happy that the city has made it a priority to continue that site's tradition of caring for our nation's service members. Housing veterans is the first step in ending veterans' homelessness. But you have to have a strong, well-connected, and comprehensive veterans program to fully support those veterans once they are housed. It is these back-end programs that are key to ensuring veterans in the district are incredibly successful. Over the last 2 years, we have been able to deliver new, innovative programs that support our veterans, programs that you don't often see in other jurisdictions. Last year, on Veterans Day, we launched Vets Rides, which was at the time a pilot transportation program. And Vets Rides was for low-income and homeless veterans, and it allowed them to take free taxi cab rides to employment opportunities, educational training, and medical appointments. In less than a full year of operations, we provided over 5,000 free rides to eligible veterans. Our operations were so incredibly successful that this is now a fully funded program for our veterans here in the district. And it's an excellent example of what I spoke about earlier of a local government filling a service gap. Here, the benefit isn't only to the veteran, it's also to the federal and local social workers and the caregivers that previously had to provide rides for those veterans. Their caseloads go down, and more local veterans can actually be assisted as a result. And my office has pioneered a number of legal clinics to better serve our veterans. Oftentimes, to access a federal veteran program, you have to have an honorable discharge. Veterans have no such barriers in my office. We serve anyone who raised their right hand. I believe this is one of the things that has made our office success, and that is the absence of barriers. And it's an unfortunate reality, but not every veteran was properly discharged from the armed services. After 18 years of war, we have seen a significant number of veterans discharged because they were suffering from PTS, a victim of military sexual trauma, or discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. What this means in functional reality for our veterans is that a veteran most in need of services is often the least able to access them. We work with a number of legal services partners to host regular DD-214 upgrade clinics. These clinics have been very successful in connecting veterans with services and benefits they didn't think they were qualified for. The key with these clinics has been repetition. We've had to build trust with veterans that have felt left behind, and we have been very successful in doing this, and as a result, we often get inquiries from other states on how we conduct these outreach clinics. We're also launching, and I'm very happy about this new program, a new District Veteran Service Officer program. This new program will allow us to file veteran claims directly with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And this in-house service will complement existing programs, such as our locally sponsored vocational rehabilitation program and our DD-214 clinics. The goal is to provide a one-stop shop for veterans that need assistance and take the complexity out of identifying and applying to veteran benefit programs. To truly have a one-stop model for veteran services, we have to have something for all veterans. Over the last year, we have rolled out veteran small business entrepreneurship training programs, monthly executive education seminars, access to capital programs, and many others. Next month, we are launching a limited seating business accelerator course, and it's one that's going to have cash prizes at the end. And so if you aren't on my email list and you want to start a business, now is the time to sign up. We have combined these entrepreneurship programs with some employment programs as well. Every year we host DC Hires Vets at the DC Armory, which is one of the largest veteran hiring events in the DMV region. And not that I'm attempting to poach any of DOE's talent, but all of you are invited. And I'd also like to invite the DOE office to set up a table so they can recruit as well. We have a lot of great programs that help veterans achieve success. We also put a lot of effort into community engagement to ensure that veterans are aware of these programs. I am most proud of the fact that we have been able to launch dedicated LGBTQ veteran engagement programs, women veteran engagement programs, as well as caregiver events. We want to make sure that we are speaking directly to all segments of our veteran population to encourage them to raise their hand and identify themselves as veterans, which we all know they often don't do. And when we need their input to ensure that we are building an Office of Veterans Affairs that represents our diverse veterans population. As we're all aware, we recently celebrated Veterans Day. For me, this was a particularly reflective Veterans Day, as it was a centennial celebration of the end of World War I, which was the war to end all wars. I don't think there has ever been a worse moniker, because nothing could be further from the truth. Since the end of the war to end all wars, men and women from our nation have repeatedly called to serve on the field of battle. They have been called to defend people they don't know, in countries they have never been to, and to fight in wars they simply did not start. Even now, in the midst of the longest war in our nation's history, men and women from the district and across the country continue to step forward and defend this country, and to defend those ideals and liberties that define us as a nation. They do so knowing full well that they may fall on the field of battle, trusting in the belief that if they do, they will not be left behind. But the truth that none of us talk about is that not every service member falls on the field of battle. Sometimes they fall when they come home. And we as a nation, and we as communities, have a responsibility to pick them up and make sure that they are not left behind. This is what my office is dedicated to, and what we as a community can dedicate ourselves to as well. Thank you very much.
That was moving. Thank you. The next thing that we are going next person we're going to bring up to the stage, let me find my place here, is the chairman of the board and executive director of Hill Vets, Justin Brown.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? I like to hear myself sometimes, so just means I'm speaking loud enough. My name is Justin Brown. I'm the founder of the Hill Vets Foundation. And first, Eli, thank you for the kind words. Elliot, always good to see you. And Rizwan, thanks for having me here today. If you're to Google Armistice Day right now, you'd be excited to know, and it's probably news that you haven't heard, but Battlefield 1 players from across the world, yes, that's a video game, took pause to observe Armistice Day. The peace didn't last long, apparently. And yes, indeed, 100 years later, it is certainly a new world we live in. People are honoring our past in new ways, for sure. Maybe a bad thing, maybe not, I don't know. But I was pretty interested to see that as one of the first things that popped up. A little bit about me. I grew up in Salt Lake City to a young single mother of 3 kids. Part of the fabric of my being became my 3 uncles, all Army. 2 of them were Vietnam veterans. They never let me down on the fact that I had made the right decision by joining the United States Navy. During World War II, I had one great-grandfather that served in the Army, and both a great-grandfather and grandfather that served in the United States Navy. Like many of my fellow veterans and service members, our stories of military service are often family tradition. For me, it was no different. My grandfather was the prized owner of an M2A1 105mm howitzer that he kept in his tiny little garage. No room for the car, just the howitzer, thank you. For those of you that may not know what a howitzer is, picture a car-sized cannon that literally has two large tires connected to it. It was America's favorite piece of artillery in World War II and shoots a shell that can travel about 5 miles. It was used to target concentrated areas of enemy troops, a must-have for any Utah family. You can say that Grandpa truly had everyone outgunned. Every year, like clockwork, for the Memorial Day and Veterans Day parade in Murray City, Utah, he, along with his band of Legionnaires, rolled out the cannon and fired blanks during the parades. He used a VA home loan to purchase his home, reminiscent of that time, and in it he raised his 4 children, 3 of them being the Army uncles I mentioned. It was in this home and surrounded by these people that I learned what it meant to be an American, and I loved every minute of it. In my trip to Grandpa's, he told me of his stories in the U.S. Army and of how he met my wonderful grandmother from very rural Montana while riding trains that were used to supply the Army. His home, howitzer and all, was a museum, truly. He had display boards with unit patches and various other memorabilia, and he was a storyteller like none I've ever met before or after. So it should be no surprise that all of his sons and his grandson joined the military. I know for me, as was probably true of my uncles, it was never a question of if we were going to join, but only a question of what branch of service. With that said, in our family, service was never specific to military service. The military was simply a stage of life, particularly if your country called. Service, on the other hand, was our way of life. Some of my earliest childhood memories revolve around various veterans organizations. My grandmother was active in the DAV Auxiliary, where she worked with and arranged various charity drives, most of them related to poor inner-city children. None of my family were particularly well off, but they got by. They always paid it forward. Service has never been about when, it has been about how. So you can imagine my excitement when at 16, I learned you don't actually have to have a high school diploma to join the service. A good enough degree will get you into the service, son, said Alan, the Army recruiter. A simple test and you're on your way to fine Army days. Oh, and you can join at 17, but your mother has to sign some paperwork. As it turns out, you could join any branch of the service with a GED, which I'd figured out how to accomplish in short order. But I needed to work on this mom situation. Fortunate for me, my mother knew that by not signing, she was delaying the inevitable. But she had one condition. I could pick any branch but the United States Marine Corps. I was not deterred. Marines are out. I don't want to go golfing with the Air Force. So that leaves the Navy and the Army. My very ambitious, maybe over-ambitious Army recruiter shows up and his general pitches, do you want to go blow stuff up? Well, I'm 17, my grandpa has a howitzer. You know I want to blow stuff up. The Navy recruiter shows up and he says, do you want to go see the world? To put this in context, it is the year 2000. Things are generally peaceful, and I decided instead of getting stuck at Fort Middle of Nowhere, I better go see the world, and maybe, just maybe, the Navy will let me blow some things up too. In the Navy, I deployed 3 times to the Middle East and took 1st Marines to Iraq for the invasion in 2003. I came back to home port San Diego, where we delivered more Marines to the battle zone in 2004. Many of those units lost lives. My sense of military service would forever be changed. My transition from being a sailor to being a successful civilian was tenuous and challenging, but I persevered. I enrolled in school, utilized the old and not so generous Montgomery GI Bill. I was poor, and I only got poorer while starting a family and working to finish my education. But I had help, and it was largely my 2 Vietnam veteran uncles that helped lift me up. When my car broke down and I had no money to fix it, my uncle gave me the car keys to the Jeep he'd just bought for his personal leisure, and then he handed me a credit card for the gas. He offered me a room in his home whenever I needed it. One day, while I was in school, I saw a sign on an 11.5 by 8-inch printed sheet of white paper. It said, "Are you a veteran?" And I remember thinking, I think so. And the second question said, "Do you need a job?" And I definitely needed a job. I called the number and the guy asked me a few questions. He said, "Come in for an interview." I did so and got a job as a work study with the American Legion. It was here, working for the American Legion at the VA, helping veterans with their claims, that I realized there was a lot of work that needed to be done for my generation of veterans. I got involved with the local VFW, finished my degree, and had the opportunity to come to Washington, D.C. on an unpaid internship. I'd never been to Washington, D.C. I sold everything I owned, hopped on a plane, came out here, lived in a decrepit basement, knew nobody, and had about 3 months until I was going to be homeless. I managed to get a job in that period of time on Capitol Hill for a minute, and then I became the first post-9/11 lobbyist for any of the major veteran service organizations. Did a lot of work working on the post-9/11 GI Bill, using my own story of how the Montgomery GI Bill was not so great. Went and worked for the Secretary of VA, doing congressional affairs for a few years. And it was around this time that I realized there were a lot of great veterans groups in Washington, D.C. Republicans, Democrats, working for VSOs, working for government agencies, whatever it may be, but there was really nobody bringing them together. And that's why we started Hill Vets. Hill Vets today is the community for veterans in Washington, D.C., government, politics, policy. We've launched a house for veterans to come into Washington, D.C. from across the country. We house them, we place them on Capitol Hill, we give them a small stipend, we try to get them a full-time job. Many of them stay on Capitol Hill, they move to federal agencies, or they move to the nonprofits. We've brought in more than 40 veterans to Washington, D.C. in this manner. We recently launched a leadership program for veterans that are here in the area. We have some incredible names involved. We have 3 former secretaries involved. former Secretary Chuck Hagel, Army Secretary Patrick Murphy, former Secretary of the Air Force Deborah James, Bob Woodward, Soledad O'Brien, CNN correspondent John Kirby, former Admiral, to help veterans who are already here in the city realize their goals and persevere and move up the career ladder. So we're very proud of how we're trying to help veterans here in the area and paying it forward. We're also proud of all the veterans that have recently run for office. 173 veterans were on the ballot this go-around. That's pretty incredible. And that is only the congressional ballot. There were hundreds more on the down ballot. Only about 80 of them, a little less than 80 of them got elected, but that's okay. They're going to keep running, and you know they have a story of continued service, and they bring a lot of value to our nation in terms of veterans have an identity that truly, generally trumps partisan politics. I don't think you'll ever meet a Marine that says he's a Republican or a Democrat before he's a Marine. And what that means is veterans have this identity in trumping partisan politics where compromise can be created, and we've certainly seen that on Capitol Hill in very real ways. So some closing thoughts. We all need to spend a little more time understanding one another, being kind, realizing that one party is not a healthy democracy. Second, you can thank a veteran, but better than that is sharing in our service to continue serving. I thank you for letting me serve. It was 4 years that defined my life, and it was a choice I am proud to have made. We are simply ordinary human beings, many of which have done extraordinary things. But that is also true of civilians in their service to our nation. As a former VA employee, I fully understand the many sacrifices that you all make on a daily basis. So I'd like to thank my team. Dylan Pasick is here today, who does a ton of great work for our organization. We're a very small team. Secretary Perry, Rizwan Shah, for having us today and inviting us here. It's truly an honor. And I would say pay it forward however you can. Hillvets for me is simply a manifestation of my upbringing. I believe truly if we all work to find something that gives us meaning, that helps someone move the ball forward just a little bit, maybe tossing the keys to your new car to a family member in need, maybe it is getting involved in a local nonprofit or with your church, whatever it may be, the more we collectively help one another and realize we are all in this struggle of life together, then the better we will all be for it. Thank you for honoring our service for Veterans Day, and thank you to the Department of Energy for making a sincere effort to hire veterans. 23%. You guys deserve, that's huge. I don't want to leave on a sour note, but Congress is less than 2% so in hiring veterans. In terms of elected officials, they're going to be around 18, 19%. So our veterans, as you know, are hard-charging team players who are mission-oriented and who love to continue serving their nation. Corporate America realizes their value, as do Hillvets in working to bring more veterans to Capitol Hill and government, and it is great to see we can count on the Department of Energy to help us in that endeavor. Thank you.
So now I'm going to invite Mr. Rizwan Shah to come back up. He's going to be the moderator for our Senior Leadership Veterans Panel. So Rizwan.
You took my script. He's got my script. He always takes my things. I want to take a moment and thank Eli and thank Justin for all the efforts that they do in helping our organizations, the different veteran organizations across the country. So at this time, I'm going to invite up our panel members. You know who you are. Come on up here and join us, please. So the Veteran Senior Leadership Panel is formed with various military backgrounds and federal careers from within the department. They'll be sharing a few thoughts and insights as to what their service does in supporting, and it's always complicated. You have to put somebody military in charge to get these panel members to do what you want. So go ahead, take off your badges so we don't catch you in the live feed and compromise your PI. That's important because we don't want to be in trouble today. All right, so we're going to just lead off a question. I'm just going to have each panel member introduce themselves. And the question is, what did their military service and what they learned, what they took from it, contributes to their continued service in the Department of Energy?
Ladies first.
That's a cop-out, but
That's Shelley.
hi, I'm Shelley Laver. I am a strategic communications advisor here at the department. I've kind of bounced around a little bit. I've served at the NNSA side and the DOE side, and I now focus on emergency operations for all of us. I retired from the Air Force in 14 and decided to move back to DC. And when doing that, the first thing that came to mind is the fact that I needed to continue to serve. And that was something that was important to me and my family. And I got the opportunity to be here at NNSA. At the time, General Klotz was a retired 3-star Air Force guy who understood the fact that I could speak Air Force and put up with all of his. And I lucked out. I joined a great team. I have the opportunity to continue to serve. I speak DOD. I spend a lot of time translating between what we do here at NNSA to the folks over in the Pentagon. And I think that has been a great benefit and a joy for me. And I have the opportunity to work with amazing people, which is one of the best parts.
Jose, why don't you go next?
Hello, Jose Barrios. I'm an NA-41, work with Shelley. Retired in 2014, lasted retired about 2 weeks. And my kid said, you gotta find something else to do. You were driving us nuts. So was lucky enough to run into some people and say, hey, this might be a good fit for you. You wanna do that again? From the time I retired to the time I came here, I was doing the contractor thing in places where I spent enough of my time anyways as it was. So I didn't want to go and play with sand anymore. And I decided, well, let's try this out. And I've been very lucky. Work with a lot of professionals, a lot of great people in here, a lot of 1,000-pound heads that are just, my job in the Army was to blow and break stuff up. So here, at least we get to build things and move things forward. So being very grateful to the organization. I've also been, my entire family has served from way, way back. And my dad just passed away a few months ago, spent 30 years in the Air Force. So almost like most people here. I have 5 brothers, all of us went Army, nobody went Air Force, so my dad still holds us accountable to that. But very happy to be here, and thank you.
Hi, my name is Jimmy McMillan. I work in emergency management, particularly in safeguard security and environmental management. Okay, why did I join the Air Force, or why did I stay in the Air Force? Stayed in the Air Force 30 years, retired in 2012. Tried the contract thing for about a year, but it moved me more often than my wife wanted me to move. But she realized when I came back home, I was cleaning out the cupboards more than she wanted me to do that as well. In fact, I missed the Air Force so much in the mornings when I would wake up, I would put my uniform on and come downstairs, just hear my wife say, "Good morning, sir," and salute me, and then I take it off and go back to doing what I was doing. But I think early on in my life as a child, I grew up in Lillington, North Carolina, close to Pope Air Force Base, and I got to associate with a lot of Army people and some Air Force folks. And I really liked the Marine Corps. I joined the Marine Corps, went to Marine Corps Officers Candidate School first because I wanted to be a Marine. But I realized I didn't like sleeping in the mud and dirt too long, more than a week, so I said, Air Force looks pretty good. So I went to the Air Force, and I was the Air Force top cop before I retired. I had about 35,000 people around the world deployed in various places, and enjoyed traveling and taking care of my young people, and also the men and women who were serving and sacrificing. But I think and I spent a lot of my time in the command track. I didn't do a lot of pretty boy jobs. I was exec one time. I was voluntold. I didn't volunteer. But I really enjoy commanding and leading and serving people. I realized when I retired, the biggest thing I missed was serving people in the camaraderie. I think that's the greatest benefit for me. And more importantly is everybody, for the most part, did their jobs, came to work motivated, and those that didn't work motivated, we found a way to motivate them. And only about 5% of those folks, though, so they didn't take up too much of your time. But those 5% you had to motivate. But I really enjoy serving and leading people. Because I realized my grandmother used to tell me all the time, and I think it's in the combat medic creed, you stand your tallest when you kneel to serve. So it's never about you, it's always about the people that you're paying it forward to. So that's why I stayed in the Air Force.
I'm going to come over here and join you guys since there's an extra seat. Better that way. So I know when I was in the Army, I learned a lot about being a part of a team, right? Every time I'm given a task or someone I know is given a task, the first questions I always ask myself was, how can I help Jose or Shelly or Mac get their mission accomplished? Can you share, Mac, a lesson in team and how it's contributed to your success here in the department?
Oh, absolutely. Got a million stories I could tell you. So how much time do you have?
You have 3.8 minutes.
Oh, 3.8 minutes. Okay. Probably the greatest challenge for me when I went to Minot Air Force Base. You guys know what Minot Air Force Base is in North Dakota? Well, you know, when you go there, everybody thinks you've been fired. So everybody called me and said, well, who do you piss off? I said, no one. I just go in and serve. I got to Minot Air Force Base. We have something called security forces groups. And at some point, they lost confidence in the security force leaders to lead security force men and women. That was embarrassing. And I was in a young lieutenant colonel about ready to pin on colonel in Air War College. And I got the call to go to Minot Air Force Base to fix a broken unit. Oh my gosh, why me? But anyway, we get there and the team was broken and they had just transitioned the groups back to security force leadership. And I was one of the first group commanders on the ground there, and Dr. Kerr, I think, was the Space Command at the time, about ready to go to Space Command. So there we are, I'm at Minot Air Force Base, and we were broken, and we were failing nuclear security inspections. We had the worst high DUI rate on base in the COP career field. Our suicide rate was pretty high, climbing. We had the worst dorms on base, and I believe we weren't winning any awards. Morale was in the basement. I had about 4 commanders working for me. I only had 2 that was really good, and I had a chief master sergeant that was yelling and a screamer, and I had a deputy who was a yeller screamer, and he cursed too much. So here I am. I said, I went to my door, went in my room, my office, and closed the door and said, why me? Said a little prayer and called everybody in, laid some ground rules down, worked really hard for 2.5 years, got down to the people who really executed the mission and knew what they were doing. People weren't broken at all. I found it very quickly, people were not broken. The team was broken at the leadership realm, at the mid-level supervision realm. That's what was broken at. We fixed that, motivated the troops, got them back up to standards. And before I left, we ended up winning, getting the best nuclear security inspection in 10 years, which was an outstanding, the highest you could get. We won about 80% of the awards on base. We had the best dorms on base. We also won the best security force group in the Air Force out of 5. And we had the best security force competition that year, first time in history of Minot. So we called it the Domination Tour. So again, all that took place not because of me, because I was just a new kid on the block. Those kids were very smart, very bright, highly motivated, wanted to do a good job. They just needed somebody to care about them, number one, and they needed leadership. So my point of all that is, it's never about the people that are here before you. It is you as the leader that breaks morale. If you're not engaged, the people won't follow.
Shelley, you're up next.
I'm up next, okay. Thanks. So I have a little bit different position. Primarily just as a communications person, my job is to always draw the team together. And in the military, I found that, one, I had to fight to get a seat at the table because no one wants the PA around. We might tell something. But having to kind of fight that battle and getting to know and gain the trust of my leadership and of my colleagues really helped develop my ability to come into a new situation here and know that it is all about the relationships. That is how you get things done. It is the team that you develop and pull around you that accomplishes so much more sometimes than the team that you might lead. I don't currently supervise anyone, but I'm in a position where I pull together the directors like Jose and our other colleagues, and we develop that cohesive message. We figure out what is the best way to promote the activities of this department, how are we going to move things along, and making sure that it's through our personal connections that we can get things done. And I think that is one of the biggest things that you can learn as a teammate is, how do you capitalize on the strengths of those around you?
Yeah, it sounds like what you're alluding to is the same thing that Justin spoke about earlier, is about looking past and being bipartisan and making those connections across the different business silos in our agency and other federal government agencies as well.
True.
Jose?
For me, it's a little bit different of experience. I came from Tier 1 units for 20-some years of my life. So,
can you tell us what that is, or is that classified?
I was in special operations side of the house for most of my career. So it's a different type of breed. You just got a point and you stay out of the way and things get done. It's a complete different culture. If you have one apple, there'll be 12 guys jumping at it to see who can bite it first. There's always a sense of commitment, being best than the team before and the folks before. So getting adjusted culturally from coming from that type of environment to an environment such as DOE and NSA, you got to refine your leadership skills. It's completely different in the sense of, again, from my experience, most of the time I think all my guys could read minds, because all you have to do is look and they know exactly what needs to be done, and if they had no problems or qualms and say, sir, you're about to screw this one up. Let me pull you to the side. Here's how we do things. And as long as you're willing to listen, and being a leader is also being a follower, and just finding that balance. And I think 51% you should be a follower, and only 49% a leader. One thing that I learned from my father many years ago: mentorship is on the eye of the beholder. Don't self-proclaim yourself as a mentor. That's for somebody else to decide if you are their mentor or not. And the other thing is, my dad always said, difference between a full wagon and an empty wagon. Empty wagon makes a lot of noise. A lot of noise. Full wagon doesn't make a noise. So sometimes you have to measure that from leadership skills and also with the type of people that you work with. There's a very strong, proud background in this organization, especially in the NNSA side of the house. A lot of very bright, smart folks that can figure out something with just a little bit of information, but they're also very proud on what's the best route to do it. Sometimes you just need to corral them together to make sure that we don't have 6 different projects that they're all going to eventually you hope, are going to end in the same spot instead of 6 different spokes going different directions. So, but going back to some of the comments that General Mack made, is leadership and followership have to be hand in hand, and learning that balance is probably the first thing that any new veteran or that comes into the organization should keep in mind. It's like, just be, what you did before is what you did, this is what you do now, and then just figure out what's going to get the mission accomplished without hurting anybody on the way, and you don't have to crush people to make them do what they need to do. And sometimes that attitude has to be modified.
Yeah, I hear 2 big points coming out of what you're saying. One is courageous followership, right? Taking what you learn from military service when it comes to teams and leading and following and applying it in a different setting. But the bigger thing I take away from what you're saying is that you have to have situational awareness. I mean, from the military, you've operated under different cultures, organizations, countries, states, cities, and that really gives you the tools to be successful. So what have you found a challenge transitioning over to the federal space, and a skill from the military that has helped you meet that challenge?
Let's start with the skills first. I think some of the skills that you learn from is step back. You know, used to tell my folks, I mean, I went through purgatory in 2012 and 13 because I had to command a bunch of Navy SEALs in special operations in Afghanistan, JTF Paladins.
I didn't know Navy SEALs could be commanded. That's
exactly right. That's why it was purgatory. So you try to keep a bunch of bees in a little box, just figure that one out. So anyway, so one of the things from that I learned was sit back. Sometimes going too fast, it's going to slow you down quite a bit. Sometimes you just got to step back, take an objective look at what is it that we need to do. Not what we should be doing, is what's the end state. And sometimes we get lost. And those are the things that we learn and to kind of massage some of the operations, some of the things that you do here on a day-to-day basis is how do you stay within the left and right limit, but still give everybody the opportunity to provide 100%. I mean, 99.9% of the individuals, don't get up in the morning, the first thing they think, let me see, I'm going to screw something up today. I mean, there's 99.9% of people that don't do that. So that's some of the skills that, some of the challenges is decisions. And I'm not saying decisions with regards to doing X, Y, and Z. Is once a plan or a project is decided upon, you got to stick, my view, you got to stick to it. Because if you change every 15 minutes, every other opinion, you never get anywhere. So sometimes you got to let things live, as painful as it may be, for 6 months to 12 months, instead of, oop, we got a little hiccup, let's change it.
You mean tactical patience?
Yeah, well, tactical, operational, strategic patience, all those things in a while. Just because you have a hiccup today doesn't mean that you have to change the entire, throw out the baby with the bathwater. So those are some of the challenges, is it just maintaining that perspective on, yeah, it might be, we may have a bump on the road right now, but let it play out, because maybe the benefits will overcome how many holes or bumps in the road you encounter up to that point. So that's my take on it.
I would say one of the challenges for me in the transition was the fact that suddenly everybody got an opinion. And there just wasn't necessarily a hard set decision. And for me, that was a little bit difficult of, oh, wait a minute, we have to stop. We have to listen to every dissenting opinion. Let's just press forward. So that's taken a little bit of an adjustment for me. I would say even before the military, I was very set on make a decision and go. So yeah, that was a trick. What I still struggle with some days. But there's so many different things that you bring as a military person to this community. Yeah, it's hard to.
There's a lot. There's a lot that you do in the military, right?
There is. I get up in the morning and I make a decision and I go forward and I tell my airmen this is the direction for the day, and off we go, and things get accomplished. Having to stop and explain the bigger picture, because we come from such diverse backgrounds here at the department, and we don't necessarily all share that same core understanding and values that in the military beat into you maybe. But everybody knows at the end of the day what your general mission is in the military. And here people sometimes struggle, because we are such a diverse department, to figure out how do we go forward, and does the little section of what I do in the department fit into the larger departmental goals, and how we make those things match. So I think it is a little bit of a challenge. You spend a lot of time explaining, but you have good people, so it makes it a little bit easier.
So Mac, how would you overcome that challenge?
Well, I don't know about overcoming it, but certainly the challenge for me is patience. And I in the Air Force, we had what we call regulations, Air Force instructions. Here you have DOE orders. The instructions were very specific about what you needed someone to do. And they still had creativity to think. If the orders weren't very clear, they could always challenge the order or the instructor, say, hey, this doesn't make any sense based on the execution of my mission. You get an opportunity to go back to the author or the policy people and have that discussion. DOE orders to me are very vague and a lot of ambiguity. Anybody can be right. So that forces you at the table to have some kind of negotiation to discuss what is the proper way to do this for the institution. I find sometimes we get into the silos too quickly and we ignore the institutional goals and organizational structure that we need to have in place. So as long as we stay in little silos, we'll always be not to fighting but negotiating among each other, trying to figure out the best approach to getting things done. So the hardest thing for me was trying to adjust to all that and put everybody in the room to have a mature, intellectual discussion to find a solution to our problem that affects the institution. Because sometimes we go find our silo solutions, but the same solution you just found affects 2 other entities in the Department of Energy. So I'm not saying we don't have teamwork, it's just harder when you don't have, if you have the vagueness and ambiguity in your orders that direct you to do certain things. And it's hard to figure out who's right. I mean, EA could be right, AU could be right, EM could be right, NSA could be right, and we all think we're right, but we all got a different approach. And our approaches may have some utility, but which one's the best approach for the institution about where we're trying to take our missions and the DOE mission set? So that was my challenge.
So do you find having to practice a little more politics and diplomacy?
No, no, diplomacy has never been my strong point. However, I've gotten better. But certainly, I don't worry about politics as much as I'm more, being politically astute, I think, is important.
How about counterinsurgency?
Well, sometimes you got to do that. I think you got to be aware of the politics involved. I mean, surely. I mean, but certainly being politically astute is more important to me than being political. So politics to me shouldn't drive what the right thing to do is. It should be driven by the mission. What is we're trying to accomplish? And then we figure out how it fits, how we best get there.
You know, one of the challenges that I found that I'd like to hear your insights is, you know, when you join the military, you know what the organization's values are. From watching movies from you were a little kid to the time you sign up, you go to the Army's website or the Navy's, you know what the organization's values are. You know what the expectation of behaviors is. You know how your leaders are supposed to behave. You can expect them to make decision-making a particular way. Now you find yourself in unfamiliar ground, right? You come into the federal space, and not just the Department of Energy. Is those looking to join federal service, what would be your advice in preparing yourself for an organization you may be unfamiliar with the culture or the area or the decision-making or the leadership skills?
Come prepared to learn and prepare yourself before you come if you can and know that it's not going to be the same as in the military. But I think sometimes people in the military get a bad rap. You know, yeah, look, there was different cultures in the military. Even in the Air Force, different disciplines had different cultures. And you had to deal with those people. When I was a GO, I had to deal with the finance folks, the money, the PA folks, you know, logistics folks. They all had different cultures. That wasn't a big deal, but we all had a common mission, a common focus. But I was telling people coming to the federal government, one, come and be go on a listening tour. Listen and learn, pay attention, ask the difficult questions before you engage. The other thing I would tell them is that learn something about the organization you're going into before you jump. Don't just go be job. I mean, if you need a job, you need a job. But sometimes job chasing can sometimes get us in trouble. We don't think about what we're getting ourselves into. I think that people really want to serve, but we got to think about what we're asking ourselves to go do and what's best fits for us and ask those questions. Sometimes you get surprised, but other times you don't. So you just know before you leap what you're getting yourself into. And talk to people who work in the organization. Matter of fact, if you got time, go volunteer. There's always opportunities to volunteer in an organization. They'll use your help as long as you can get a clearance or already have a clearance. So do that before you engage. If you have that kind of luxury. So certainly I would say come to listen and learn, and don't think you can bring the same kind of approach to your style used in the military, because it just may not work.
Jose, your particular job in the military, the umbrella from special operations, the Green Berets, your job was to go into a culture and build relationships. So in talking about coming into an organization which you might not have the same exact values or leadership style, what did you pick up from your experiences that helped you through your transition?
I mean, people are people. Doesn't matter. I mean, it's just trying to understand how far you try to get into the tribe and how much distance you keep from the tribe. Because if not, if you become one of the tribe, then you're not looking at things objectively. And if you get too distant from the tribe, then you're just creating more problems than solutions. So culturally, I would echo what General Max said, is do your homework. If you're coming into any position, just do your homework and be humble. First thing that the command sergeant major or the command master chief tells you when you take command is what, sir? Do not do squat for the next 90 days until I'll tell you. And if you learn that early, then you start learning what the culture of the organization is, how things move, and then you identify those things that actually need fixing versus I'm king, I don't like that wall painted pink, I don't like that wall painted blue, for no rhyme or reason. So what you're creating now is turmoil where there was none. So for me getting into this organization, I knew a lot of the folks just from the weapons side of the house and so forth, but you got to find those individuals that tell to you straight. And I'm going to throw his name out there, Jose Masonette. I mean, if you never had a chance to talk to the man, you sit down with him for freaking 15 minutes. You'll be the smartest person you know at minute number 7. I mean, very patient man, never spent a day in the military. Very patient man, knows his stuff, and he tells you from cradle to grave. And then you make decisions from there. But you got to find those folks out there that have been there, done that, got the hand the T-shirt to guide you in a direction. You can have the best idea in the world, but if those that are with you or behind you or in front of you, they don't agree with it, that idea is going to die and you're going to die with it. So to me, it's that. Just step back, learn the culture, and it's not always, well, the way I used to do it. Well, the way you used to do it, you're not there anymore. So this is the way we do it now. So just move with the culture, be part of the culture, be part of the tribe, and not just try to make something that it's not.
Before Shelley goes, I want to just tell the audience there are mics out here that you could jump to ask questions, or you can ask questions directly and I'll echo it as well.
When I came home and told my parents that I had decided to join the military after my mom's head exploded, my father looked at me and asked me 2 questions. And he wanted to know branch of service and officer enlisted. He had been Army enlisted and was not going to let his baby girl do that. So because I came back with Air Force officer, I was allowed to continue to live. But he told me at that time that the best thing that I could do when I went off to my first assignment was to find my senior NCO and make them my best friend. And that was something that I took to heart. And I walked into my very first duty station as a medical officer who had to run a clinic and maintain patient care and everything else, and told them, my senior master sergeant, that his job was to make sure that I did my job as an officer, and I would make sure that we maintained the credibility and the clinical skills that were necessary. And because we became a team, and he would pull me aside and be like, ma'am, that was dumb, don't do that. And there wasn't a repercussion to him. We had that relationship where we made our clinic one of the top clinics in the hospital because we went out of our way to make sure that we were supporting each other in everything that we did. And I think the same thing applies to any position that you walk into in a government agency. Learn it, do your research before you go to that job interview, make sure you know what their mission is, and then find someone who's been there and make them your best friend, and make sure that you are learning from their experiences and taking those bits of advice and figuring out how together you can take your new eyes and views about the organization and their existing experience and make it a better place. And I think that's one of the good things that can come from growing and changing environment.
I don't want to dominate this mic, but there's no camera, so I guess I can do that. One point I want to make real quick, I know she hit on it. as a leader,
Actually, we are broadcasting, Mark. So
Okay, I'm
right
sorry.
up there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We got plenty of time, though. Go ahead.
As a leader, when you walk into a new organization, one of the things I learned early on is you got to create a space where your people are allowed to come in and give you a warning light. Because if you don't, you're going to fail. And your people you can't be upset because they give you bad news. You can't be upset because they tell you you have no clothes on. You got to put some clothes on, get dressed properly, and let them help you because they're trying to help you then. They're not going to come back too many times if you kick them in the gut. So I learned that the hard way one time as a young captain, as my first command, by telling one of my senior SEALs that what they had to say wasn't interesting to me. And boy, when I went out to the field and evaluated the situation, I failed miserably. So that was a lesson I took with me for the rest of my career. And one of the things we like to do in the military, they give you what they call feedback, and they give you a feedback form, to officers. And I was a young captain command over in Turkey, and I had this major who I thought was a weak leader. And I'm a young captain, I know about leadership now, I'm cocky, So I'm thinking I'm all that in a bag of chips. He gives me this feedback, and then he typed it. That's problem number one. Typed feedback is never good. I mean, they can fill that page up. So, he gives his feedback, and it was horrible. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. So I put my head between me and went back to my office, and everything that was negative, I circled in red. He had a front and back page, too. Usually just the front side. He had both pages, back front filled up. So I circled in red, and even today I look at that, and for the next 20 years of my career, I would take that feedback out and look at it before I took a new command. Just remind myself what it means to be a leader and begin to educate myself on leadership. But my point I want to make is allow space for your people to give you a warning light, to come in and tell you when things aren't going well, because they're going to be the first to know. It won't be you.
This is all really good advice. I hope everyone's listening out there. But I also want to say the advice they're giving is not just for the veterans who are transitioning. You can go to the National Training Center's Vet Success Workshop and learn a lot about transitioning as a veteran, but a lot of the advice that you're giving can affect anyone who's transitioning from one position to another or an organization to another. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about service, right? But before we go completely down that, I want you to tell me what the oath means to you, the oath of office that you took.
I equate the oath of office, I just see the flag. I mean, flag is there when you raise your right hand. As a veteran, the last thing that's going to cover you is the flag. So to me, I look at the colors of the flag for loyalty, bravery, courage, and that's what service, to me, the flag is my service. And that's my focus in that respect. I don't think much about any other things. I mean, with regards to, the oath is the oath, and you are true to the oath, but the oath is because of the flag and who we're supposed to be loyal to. And it's the only thing that's going to carry on way past my days.
Don't know really how much more to add to that. It's just dedication. It's basically promising yourself to this nation and making sure that you're going to do whatever you can to uphold its freedoms and make sure that my kids stay safe and make sure that they have every opportunity that's afforded to them. And, having been overseas and seeing the struggles of the kids in Iraq and making sure that my kids don't have to go through that same thing. That's a big part of it for me.
Wow, service. For the oath, before you take an oath, you should always read it. Make sure you fully understand it. I think as young officers, we're so happy about getting the commission, we just throw our hands up and take the oath. But when I have some time to sit and think about it and digest it, boy, that's a powerful oath when you think about it. And the things you are committed to do in that oath, those who've taken it time and time again. Service is just about sacrifice. I didn't understand what service really meant until I had to get on my knees and present a flag to a grieving widow. And then when I had to do the dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base, and you walk up that plane and all those coffins are draped, and you hear the families to the side weeping, and you can't look at them because you know you're in this military formation. You got to keep going. That's service. And when you get that point, then you know what service really means. It's just sacrifice. Our families make it all the time. You know, our kids make it. You know, and the member in the uniform. You know, just like the flag. When you see the flag blowing in the wind and it's tattered, we take it down. We replace it. When vets come home, they're tattered. We ought to heal them. We ought to take care of them. That's why Mr. Hill's story, Vets on the Hill, is very resonating with me because I think that's what we ought to be doing. We're not just doing it for our vets. We ought to just do it because it's human decency. It's the right thing to do. It's not by any of us. It's just the right thing to do. So service is tremendous sacrifice. You don't know sacrifice till you can't stand on your own, till you can't feed yourself. When you walk through Walter Reed, like I used to do as a general officer, just walk through there and talk to any trooper, no matter what branch of service he or she was from. It didn't matter to me. And those guys trying to salute you, laying in bed and saying themselves, I had to do it all over again, I'll do it again. That's service. So when you go to bed at night and you get on your knees about how bad they hurt, or whatever you do before you close your eyes for your recuperative rest, think about who did I serve today? Who did I kneel to serve today? And when you wake up in the morning, for me, the first thing is prayer and PT, and then food. Okay, so think about what you're gonna, who you're gonna serve when you get in your car and driving to work. What am I gonna serve? What am I gonna do better today? How am I going to improve somebody along the way? That's service.
You know, when I took the oath as a federal employee, I thought it would mean something different, right? When I entered the Army as a private and I stood before the flag and took the oath, or when I got my stripes as an NCO and I took the oath, or when I went to warrant officer candidate school and took the oath and I became a commissioned officer and took the oath, and then as a federal employee I took the oath, I had epiphany. And it's interesting, and I share this epiphany is, did you know that the oath for a federal employee is verbatim the same as a military officer? It is exactly the same. So part of that transition conversation, I used to think like, I am in the military, I'm the tip of the spear, right? Then I realized there's an entire spear behind me too, right? And service and understanding what the federal employees, they're serving their country the same as I am, in a different discipline, in a different job, in a different capacity. But that oath represents to me the organizational values. It is the mission statement. It is the strategic plan. It is everything. And I think the flag, as you said, you know, you come in with a flag, you go out with a flag, that really resonates. And, you know, and I can appreciate that. Now, when you think about the oath and the fact that it's verbatim the same for federal employees, and is verbatim the same for military officers. We got one over there. You can wave. He's in uniform. You see him in the white shirt. You got to point him out. Talk to me about that, about federal employees, military officers having the same oath.
I think it goes back to we're doing it for the nation. To me, it goes back to the flag. I do solemnly swear that I will defend and protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear allegiance in true faith and allegiance to the same. We're all talking about the flag, so it doesn't matter to me. That's why I learned. That's why I see the flag as the symbol for service. The reason why you wake up in the morning, what you do to make sure that your kids, the neighbor's kids, the neighbor, everybody else, you know, that things are better for everybody. And so that's where I look from the oath. Very, you know, small. I learned many years ago. It was my coming out of Somalia, October 4th. We lost quite a few men in Somalia that day. And I was lucky enough that my team, most of us remained together for a while. And since that day, every time that we deployed, for some reason, and I don't know who started, I think it was Sergeant Major Riggs, that we would take the the flag off the uniform, and then before we deploy, we'll put the flag, we'll do the oath, and then put the flag on. And we did that. I mean, I spend more time outside of the U.S. than the U.S. So I learned that, and it struck me how then a lot of people started doing it. And you see a number of the units out there that will do that now before they go and deploy, that they will remove the flag from the shoulder and then do the oath, and then they'll do the oath, they get the flag on, and then they'll march to the plane, whatever they have to do. So to me, it all goes back to that flag. I mean, it may be simple, it may be quirky, if you will, for some people, people in other countries.
Sentimental?
Well, for us, it's sentimental. I know for me it is, but other countries don't revere their flag as we do. I mean, I can show you 3 or 4 stripes of every combination of yellow, white, and blue, or yellow, white, and red, and I think it's 53 countries that have those 3 color stripes, left to right, same thing. There's only one that looks like ours that has 13 stripes and 50 stars. That's it. Everybody else, you can go down Embassy Road and you think, well, is that Tunisia or is that Kenya? Or you can't tell, but you can tell what the U.S. flag is.
So Shirley, does the oath help bridge for you your military and your federal service?
I don't know that the oath in particular does. I think it's more the fact that none of us chose federal government because we were trying to become rich. It's because we feel a dedication to serve our nation. And the fact that we take the same oath that military officers take, I think just kind of shows that level of commitment. I talk to friends. I have a good friend of mine who realized that after he left federal service to chase the dollar, that he wasn't feeling the same kind of satisfaction. And now he's trying to work his way back into government. And it's going to be a giant pay cut for his family, but his job satisfaction meant so much more at the end of the day that that's a choice that he's making. Because he realized that, in the government, everybody's working towards the same kind of common goal. And that was to make this a better nation. And the fact that we all kind of swear our allegiance to that when we take that oath really meant something.
No, I think the oath you take when you come in federal service and the oath you take in the military is the same. It's the same because it wants to remind us that it's not about you. It's about your country. So it's very simple. It's not about you. Sometimes I think we have to hide ourselves behind our country and still push it forward. And you have to get underneath the mission and push and pull. So it's never about you. I mean, any military officer can tell you when they're commanding something, end of the day, there's some 2, 3, 4 stripes standing in your doorway. Sir, ma'am, do you have a minute? Well, that minute turns to an hour, and you're already at 7 o'clock, you haven't got to your email yet. So either you're going to take some stuff home. So it's never about you. You're always sacrificing. That's constantly, that's what the oath means. You're going to sacrifice, and you're going to be serving others. That's why it's the same, because the mission is the same. We're doing it for, as Jose said, doing it for the country.
Expand the conversation here a little bit. You're doing it for your country and service to your nation. One of the I helped teach part of the National Training Center's Vet Success Program. I found that in my transition, that serving at work just wasn't enough, right? So if you're not happy with your work life, you change your life's work. That your work doesn't stop just because you're off the clock. And for me, I reach out to organizations like Hill Vets and DC Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs. And even at my little level, how I can champion them, offer them any assistance, working with the homeless veterans in Montgomery County and Governor Hogan's programs. I have to do more, right? I feel that leaving the military, my sense of service did not go away. Now, do you think you had that sense of service before you joined the military, or was that something that came out of your military service?
Well, for me, I was conditioned as a child because I always served in my community, and served in our church, and volunteered all the time. So I figured it was just a part of who I was. And I was weird as a child by most of my teenagers' imagination. Yes, I was different. I mean, you know, while most of my teenagers were having fun doing the party stuff, you know, I didn't have my first drink of alcohol until I was 35 years old, so that tells you how different I was. But discipline was important, and structure was important, and more importantly, not embarrassing my mother was equally as important. So I think when you look at where you come from, and what you saw either in your community, the kind of people your parents associated with, what your parents did or didn't do, it shapes who you are as an individual. That is your grounding. So I grew up serving old people, cutting their grass for free, you know, delivering newspapers for free, chopping wood for old folks for free. You know, I have a very passion about serving the elderly people in the community. So I think it's in you. And I think the military just kind of manifests it and gives you a role to continue that service. And like you say, going off and chasing the dollar, you know, you come back to where you fulfill from a service standpoint, because at the end of the day, you're going to die. You know, and there's a story that goes on the tombstone. There's the date of sunrise, the date of your born, and the date that you're going to decease. In the middle, there's a dash. Probably heard the story. So all that service is in your dash. That's how you're going to be remembered. It's what's in your dash is how you should what you should ask yourselves. What's in my dash when this life is over? And that's how you're going to be remembered. Not where you went to school and how many degrees you had on the wall, how much rank you achieved. And some people may remember that, but your greatest contribution to whatever you serve is going to be in that dash.
You have the mic, Shelley, so now you have to talk.
Great. State your question again, please.
Was your sense of service amplified because you serve as in the military, or did you already have that sense of service when you joined the military?
I think you already have a sense of service to join the military. It's not something most people do on a whim. You do it because you want to dedicate yourself to something. But yeah, I mean, it was obviously amplified during my service. Things that I thought I was going to go in and do took a real turn. I started off in the Med Corps. The Air Force decided to outsource us, so they said, "Oh, congratulations!" I said, No, you owe me 2 more years on my contract," which is not something they expected me to say when they were giving me a free pass to get out. But it allowed me to do different things. It allowed me to serve in different ways. You know, going from the medical side of the house where I got to care for our service members to going to the PA side of the house where I got to talk about all the amazing things that our men and women did and to help shape stories. And when I was in Iraq, not only did I tell the stories of the men and women from the U.S. service, but I trained the Iraqis and spent time teaching them how to talk about their successes and how to promote their fledgling government and how they were going to, you know, promote this to the world and make their lives better. And working with the men and women that I did over there, you get to learn that just because someone looks different, speaks differently, was raised differently, doesn't mean that they don't share very similar values. And the men that I worked with, their biggest concern was at the end of the day, were their families safe and were they taken care of? And that's a value that we have. And you kind of just continue to promote that as you go on.
I'll have to echo what General Mack said. I mean, service, I think you're brought up in that way. You refine it by encountering other people as you move along through the military, and it gets refined as you move along. But the foundation comes from your family. I remember many times where my head hurt because my dad will see one of the neighbors carrying their bags from their car to the house, and I was just standing in there, and it's like, your hand's broken? Bang! Go and help and move the bags in. So I think it's instilled from a young time. I mean, in service comes in different ways. I mean, some other folks serve in a silent way. And again, it goes to the empty wagon versus the full wagon. Do what is right because it's right for you to do. You don't worry about what Peter thinks or Joey or Mikey or whoever. I mean, most of the folks that know me in here, I'm a very reserved person, and I never say what's on my mind. So
that's the other Jose.
Yeah. So it's just treat people the way they want to be treated. Be honest with them, they'll be honest with you. And then that's how you serve them. If you try to sugarcoat, I'm not a sugarcoat kind of guy. Try to sugarcoat things, you're just delaying the inevitable. So just cut through it. That's how you serve them. That's how they serve you. That's how we serve the nation. That's how we serve the mission.
Yeah, I agree on the sugarcoating. I think one of my challenges has been is coming into federal space and finding a veteran who's no longer exhibiting positive leadership behaviors. My patience is a big fat 0 when it comes to that, right? But I want to also add, what I found in the federal space is many non-military folks who are serving this nation in an exemplary fashion. So I always say, if you want to find out about the moral character of this country, you ask a vet or you ask a veteran employee, and you'll find it. Now, touching back to service again, in the federal space, we all encounter many challenges, but we all encounter a lot of wonderful things too. What are some of the similarities that you have found in your federal service, positive similarities, that remind you of your military service?
Dedication to get the mission done. Federal employees get a bad rap that 8 hours and peace out. But I don't really find that to be true if there is something at hand that has to get done. And we work in the emergency operations space. And the number of people in this organization, department-wide, that will stand up and support an operation when something goes wrong. The number of people we have that volunteer to be part of ESF 15, so during a hurricane response, who are going to pick up these extra hours, who are going to deploy to devastated areas and do what they have to do just to get the job done. That's not what's in their PD. That's not what, it said when they swore in that, hey, I'm going to come here and be a contracting officer for 8 hours a day. But yet we have people that have packed up their stuff and deployed to Puerto Rico for 3 or 4 months and, work 20-hour days.
Oh, hold on a second. That's the empty cart going by, the empty wagon. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's loud rumbling behind the stage right now.
But it's that dedication. It's that willingness to do whatever it takes to accomplish the mission that transcends, military or federal. And, and this particular contracting officer has never served a day in the military, but raised his hand and ran out the door and continues to serve on the other ESF 12 missions. And it's great to see that people will just do what it takes.
I share her sentiment. I found a lot of people that committed, a lot of teamwork. I mean, I got people on my staff that, they work they're working as long as I need them to work. I mean, they're surely committed to getting the job done. They spend a lot of time thinking about what has to be done and just diving in. And they work late as you need them work, most of them. So I find the same kind of thing. Look, every organization got a few people who's just not putting out. Let's be honest about this thing. I mean, you always have that 3 to 5%. They just aren't going to get it. And no matter what you do, they just aren't going to get it. But you always got that good 95, 97% that are doing yeoman's work to make our country move. So that's what you'll appreciate across the board.
Yeah, almost exactly the same words. It's you'll have that 3 to 5%, and then as a leader, as a team member, the thing to learn is, or the thing to apply is, the moment you've overlooked a standard, you just set a new standard. So sometimes that 3 and 5% brings the other 97% a notch down, because they will, you have, actually I would say 99.9%. 99.9% of them will give you 110% when you ask for it. It's that 0.1 that always has, that there's an issue with. But if you can handle that, the other 99 will make sure that that 1% goes away. But it's, when you talk about going back to the service piece, you owe that to the folks that work around you. Even if you don't have to be in a leadership position, be a director, just do what is right for the people that are going, that wake up every morning, come to work to do the best they can do. Very few people get up in the morning and say, how am I going to screw something up today? That's my key for today. What am I going to screw up today? It doesn't really happen.
That's good advice. Does anybody have any questions out there? Need some music? All right, then I'm going to go ahead and transition to some closing comments. We'll start down here with Shelly. You have the mic. It's so much easier that way. So whatever you want to talk about, whatever we've been talking about, something off subject, up to you, concerning Veterans Day.
For me, Veterans Day and Memorial Day have a little special tone because my uncle never made it home from Vietnam. And I have friends that never made it home from Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I always kind of take an extra moment to remember them, to remember their families, to think about the sacrifices that they made for me and for everybody else in my life. And I kind of go back especially to, the personal experiences I had in Iraq and having to have those ceremonies of a lost service member. And the picture of the boots and the rifle are always vivid in my mind. It's something that we all, sometimes take for granted because it's far away. It's something that we saw on television. But remember that it meant something very personal to a lot of people. And if it's somebody that you served with, or their family member, or their children that are still wondering what it's like to go on without mom or dad. And I think just taking 30 seconds out of your day to remember that it's more than just a day off, but that it's to honor those that served and remember those that gave all.
For me, I think it goes back to the pride and the honor of being an American citizen or living in the United States, where it's truly the land of opportunity. For me, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, I try to see it more as a celebration more than a somber. And again, it's just because, different experiences and so forth. And there's no prouder moment than you go back, like I was Arlington Cemetery on Thursday, and to see the son and daughter of one of my soldiers that actually got commissioned. One just came back from Ranger School, and then his daughter just got commissioned 4 days before the ceremony for his deceased dad. And I had not seen her since she was 8 years old. And to me, that's the pride. To me, that's service, going back to how you've been raised. You do it for the right reasons. They're not whining. They're not crying. They just picked up their boots, strapped up their boots, and said, okay, how are we going to carry the tradition? How are we going to do So I see now Memorial Day, Veterans Day, more of a commemoration of the sacrifice that was made and how's that being paid forward by family members, neighbors, friends, and so forth. So that's what I take from these 2 days, sir.
Well, for me, Veterans Day, 4th of July, Memorial Day, all wraps up into one because it all kind of means a sense of freedom, if you will. The only thing I will leave with the audience is this. Think about the many sacrifices that people made before you. Think about whose shoulders you stand on day to day and what you represent and how they elevated you. Look deep inside yourself and continue to ask yourself about what am I contributing to my country, what's going to be in my dash when I leave this earth. And more importantly, find somebody besides your spouse and your children that you can love outside your family. I think extending that circle of respect and love to other people is what keeps us whole as humans. My son is doing research at University of North Carolina in the medical field, and what he tells me is that humans must have contact with another human. He said that's a very true statement. We think we're loners, and I consider myself a loner by default sometimes, not sure by position. But I think having human contact with each other during the day, growing with each other in their pain as well as in their jubilation is the key to making you feel better as a person. So certainly give that some thought and go volunteer in organizations. There's a lot of organizations to volunteer in. If you got some time, you should do that. You know, take your son or daughter with you to give them a sense of service so you continue that for generations now. That doesn't leave us, and I don't think it will, but certainly started to do those kinds of things. And so be a helping hand. Always extend a hand to pull people up when they're on their backs, because you're going to see a lot of people out there. And a lot of our veterans are homeless. They have no jobs. And I applaud all the organizations who are trying to help close that gap and fix some of those ills with our vets, because they deserve nothing less. And I think we all have an obligation to give them our very best of what we can contribute to keep our nation free. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for participating today and allowing me to pick your brain. Can we give them a round of applause here? And I'll put in a plug for the National Training Center's Vet Success Program, because this panel is pulled from them to mirror. I'll share what Veterans Day means to me. It's really service. And I have a very strong resolve in supporting things for our nation. I think it is the best nation on the planet. And the reason is we're always aspiring to be the best nation. I think we have to remember that. There'll be bumps and there'll be bruises, but we're always moving forward. And that's the most important thing to remember. I have to take a moment and thank my kids, just because this is YouTube and that's their television. So Jenna, Dev, and Brianna, I know you're watching, and my parents, and El Sempre Mio Cuore Maria. Your hair looks great. Yeah, I made sure I brushed him up before he came in. He was a Green Beret. But I want to thank all of you for attending, and everyone who's out in cyberspace watching. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your service, whether you're a veteran or a non-veteran. You're still serving, and continue to serve. There's many ways that you can serve besides working for federal government, and I appreciate it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a small, what are we calling it? Refreshments, reception in room 1E245 in the Forestall building. It will not be broadcast. I'm sorry, you won't be able to share in the coffee and cupcakes that are out there. Thank you for dialing in once again, and we'll see you soon.
Accountability.